Hey guys, it's Wednesday, July 3rd. On this episode, Fanny Lakoubay, I hope I said that correctly, joins me as a guest to discuss the Editional App, where you can upload photos, turn them into NFTs, and instantly place them on the blockchain. It's all pretty cool stuff, and we discuss much more as well. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with somebody that you know that you think will enjoy this episode. Enjoy.
This is the BlockHash Podcast.
To start, why don't you tell me a little bit about your story and your background and how that kind of led you into what you do now and blockchain and stuff?
Sure, yeah. So I'm sure, as you can hear, my origins are French, and even if I lived for 12 years in New York, it's not going to go away. So I worked for 10 years in the more than 10 years in the art market, first in France and then in the US, but always on the tech side. So I was never like the glamorous art market person that you can imagine, like just a tech person that nobody likes, and worked at Christies for 4 years before pretty much falling down the blockchain rabbit hole. And when that happened, actually, they closed my department at Christie's, and a friend of mine had started these panels and conferences about technology to educate art people about new technology. And I started moderating panels on blockchain for her. I mean, the first time she asked me, she was like, "I have my moderator fell through for next week. Can you moderate a panel on art and blockchain?" And I was like, "Block what?" And so I had 2 weeks to a week pretty much to check it out and really understand what it was, and that was kind of the start. Then I got involved with a few other art and blockchain companies, like there was Snark.art. We're trying to work with established artists to come experiment with digital art and blockchain technology, and then from there, it's very small. I mean, it's you have the blockchain families, and you have the Ethereum family, then you have the NFTs families, and then the sub niche of art and blockchain, which is mostly NFTs on Ethereum now. So that kind of became a specialty. So I've done a lot of blockchain and art panels in the last year. And now I'm involved with a company called Editional, which we can talk more.
Yeah, totally. While you mentioned it and it's on my mind, what was your experience at Christie's like? I didn't know that you spent 4 years there.
So Christie's. So it's funny. I came to Christie's via a startup that they acquired. So they, as many large companies, they have an IT department, right? So it's very network, very process focused, and it's IT. It's not product. So they were trying to be more agile, and early on, actually, compared to other companies, we always say the art market is very, very slow at adopting any new technology. But they were pretty early to say, okay, we can't transform an IT department into a product department to launch an iPhone app in less than 2 years. So we're going to get a team to do that. And so that's how I came to Christie's with a company they acquired. And it was originally only a collection management system. So it was an inventory management system for collectors, for gallerists, and other art market people, and slowly they discovered that it was there were more value in the product team than the product in itself. So they really kind of discontinued the collection management system and kept the team as internal emerging technology group, which I think is very smart. It's hard for a large company to adopt new teams and kind of incorporate like agile small startup, working style into a larger corporation. So they've done a good job. I mean, they discontinued the product. That's why I kind of left. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Why do you think Christie's was so interested in diving into blockchain? You think they're just falling behind, or?
Well, they have a few champions inside Christie's who have other jobs as like specialists, or I mean, there's Anne Bracegirdle, who is a photography specialist, but who organized the last two conferences. So they had one last July in London about art and blockchain, and then this year they're having one on AI and art. And she's been the one pushing these innovations internally. So I think more than like a whole system and organization, you really need a few champions to lead this initiative. So we'll see what they will do. Like, I mean, they partnered also for one sale to be registered on the blockchain. I mean, it's a lot of hype and kind of checks. Like, okay, we've done like something in blockchain. Okay, like we can move on to something else. It's a lot of PR. So we have to still see on the long term what they're actually going to use. And I'm a strong believer in the blockchain use cases in digital art, not so much for traditional art. I mean, the art market has been physical pieces of art have been sold for centuries without blockchain. So maybe there's something that's going to be adopted, but I really strongly believe that the main use case is for digital art and kind of develop a new market, because there is currently no market of digital art. So for me, that's the real excitement.
Absolutely. And other than just digital art, I mean, blockchain gives artists a bunch of avenues as well to help them monetize their art and protect their royalties and their works and the authenticity of it. So there are some other benefits as well for art in terms of blockchain.
Yeah, but see, I think this is and you're right. This is true for like being able to prove authenticity, provenance, have royalties included, which was never the case
Hmm.
for any artist. This can be done for physical pieces of art. Like, I'm a painter, I can actually implement like have a QR code or something that link my piece to the blockchain. But there's still like a missing link between the physical piece and the blockchain per se, because it's
Hmm.
you need IoT, you need like this unique identifier. I mean, I don't want to be mean, but like the art market is a fraudster market. They've been fraud for centuries. So what is like someone gonna do? Is they're gonna peel off the sticker or like whatever is on the painting and replace it and put it on the fake one? I mean, when there's a lot of money involved, there is gonna be fraud if it's possible. So for me, this is like something you will always have to rely on specialists, like human. Technology might not be enough to like really prove that a painting from like centuries ago, we don't have the record on the blockchain from centuries ago, right? So it's always going to be partial
Right.
record, and it's great, but it's not enough, and it's a little gimmicky, if you ask me. But maybe I hope like some companies will manage to work it out and be able to bring it to the art market. But when you and if we take the same things that you mentioned, like provenance, authenticity, royalties, I mean, if it can be embedded in code, in smart contracts, inside the file of the art itself for digital art, this is a perfect use case, right? So it's something that is much easier and a bit more obvious, I would say, than like the tradition, like the
Hmm.
physical art pieces. The problem being that there is no art market for digital art currently, right? I mean, before blockchain, you could not um, have limited edition of digital art. You had a JPEG, great, you could copy it a million times and be done with it, right? So how could you value something that can be replicated like infinitely. And now, okay, we have the technology, so it's great. And people got a little bit maybe too excited. They were like, "Oh, great, we have the technology, so we can have value for limited edition art pieces." But you also need like supply and demand, and like emerging artists and established artists. I mean, we have to build this market. So I think it's like everything for me right now is about building this art market for digital art. And I've used this analogy a lot, but it's like for me the traditional art market will be a little bit like the cigar market. Like cigars have always been like very niche, very like VIP, and very like high level.
Mhm.
But there's not much innovation in cigars. And when cigarettes came along, well, they blew up the market, right? Like everybody was smoking cigarettes, and cigars did not disappear, but they became even nicher. And it's like, in a sense, like maybe the traditional art market will be like cigars, and digital art might be like cigarettes, where it's like get all the innovation and get all I mean, everything that everybody wants is like how millennials are going to consume art. I mean, they don't collect any paintings or prints or anything, and God knows that all the online platforms have tried to get techies and millennials and younger collectors to purchase art, and it's not really hasn't really worked. So we still need to crack the code on like what are millennials gonna do? Are they not gonna collect art? Are they gonna collect digital art? Or are they not gonna give a shit about art? Which is kind of sad to say that, but yeah, we don't know.
I think with millennials, and it's a good point too, you bring it up, and I talk about this stuff a lot, and other than just art, talk about it with gold and finance and whatnot. Um, our children, our grandchildren, generations after us, not just millennials, they're gonna like different things. They're gonna see value in different things, and our traditional view of art they might not find as valuable.
Yeah,
But with blockchain and with technology, it does open up the avenue for art to evolve in a sense. And in that way, art might continue to live on, whether it's online, whether it's digitally, whether technology enhances it, whether technology protects it. Only time will tell.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
there's definitely an opportunity for that to evolve. And like you said earlier, it is a very small market. Like it's very, very new. Digital art, crypto art, it's very, very small. But it's also growing really fast too. There's a lot of artists that are diving into it that are actually driving tons of revenue. I know there's some other platforms that have done very, very well, like Super Rare in the last year, um, driving a lot of attention into blockchain and into this idea of crypto art or digital art or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, there are new artists, and when you talk to people who actually create on these platforms, it's I think what is interesting is when you actually really talk to people who create on these platforms, and understand their creative process, and the kind of new artists as well. Like some of them are not artists trained or anything like that. So it's also the new generation of artists, not just collectors. I think that's great.
Absolutely. And going into a more digital age, the other benefit of blockchain is the ability to timestamp something. So, I mean, being able to register something on the blockchain and protect art that's been around for generations is going to be very difficult still. You make a good point there. But for newer artists and newer works of art, your ability to permanently record it on the blockchain and verify it gives you a huge advantage over the ability for someone to copy what you've done, to make digital replications online. You'll actually be able to prove that you own the original piece, because you can prove when it was actually created. So for newer artists, I think it's a massive opportunity. I think there's still some challenges though, figuring out what to do about older pieces of art, and not just art, but any type of artistic creation in general.
Yeah, no, and you make a good point. I mean, that goes back to what I was saying. I think it's much easier to use the blockchain for new pieces of art, and that have work with the artist to put it on the blockchain. I'm sure you've read about, there was this case on of a person who put an artwork. I mean, he put the Mona Lisa on, I think it was Veris Art, which is a Bitcoin based art registry, and said, I'm the creator. And so now it's like, forever and ever, you have a lie recorded on the blockchain that he's the creator of the Mona Lisa. And it's like, it's we still need to figure out a lot of things, and the blockchain is a technology. It's not gonna, I mean, what was the expression, like trash in, trash out? It's like, yeah, you have to find a way to work with creators and make sure that what is on the blockchain is not trash, because otherwise, yeah, it's a little bit useless at the end of the day. But again, I mean, it's like, going on with the Mona Lisa. I mean, they announced today, I think, that the Louvre is gonna, they say that for the first time, the Mona Lisa is coming out of her, like, glass cage with VR experience. I mean, they can't have people approach Mona Lisa for, like, security and insurance and all of the reasons that you might imagine. But now with VR, you can actually go closer to the work. So there are technology, there are, like, experimenting with it. It's taking it's time, but it's happening. And someone last week said that at a conference, we were talking about the fact that everybody says, oh, it's blockchain today is like internet in the 1990s. And someone said, well, maybe we're not in the 1990s, maybe it's like internet in the 70s. And it's like, yeah, maybe it is like the 70s, and it's still gonna take a lot more time to, I hope not, to be honest, but they might be right. It might take much more time to get there. But I think that's why it's really important to experiment and have all these platforms have emerging artists and established artists, like everybody, to really experiment and see what comes out of it, because we don't know, we can't read the future, and it's definitely happening, but we don't know what's gonna survive. And it's what's really interesting for me is, like, if we've seen a lot of business models who are trying to replicate what existed in the traditional and physical art market, and put that onto the blockchain. So we have marketplaces, we have registries, we have things like that are like models that we know and that already exist. But there are newer things that don't exist yet in the real world, and they're making new rules for the digital art market, and that was something I was really interested about. When I was approached by Editional to work with them, because they literally put an app out there and they said to the community, experiment with it, and then we'll see what comes out of it, and work with you guys to make it better and make it what people want, instead of like the story of most blockchain companies. No offense to anybody, but it's very much like, oh, I think I solved like these issues that actually nobody cares about, and there is no product market fit, and then it takes a lot of time to pivot and change. So these iterations and figuring out things like that, for me, it's like fascinating, because it's that's how you discover new uses, and how people actually create digital art and share it and value it as well. I mean, there are entire new rules of art valuations that could emerge from all these experiments, which is quite fascinating.
Yeah, it again, the technology and the industry and blockchain is just really, really early right now. So there's obviously a lot of room
Mhm.
to grow and to figure out all this stuff, and we're all kind of learning together. But I have no doubt that we'll figure it out given time. And there's a lot of good projects out there, and there's a lot of people working really hard to figure it out. And a lot of the issues are with scalability and getting it so that it's actually able to be used by the everyday person on a daily basis. And that goes for using dApps and
Yeah.
NFTs and art and whatnot. And if you just take Ethereum, for example, Ethereum still has a lot of issues with their gas price getting expensive when traffic picks up.
Oh
and
gosh, yeah.
they're having some scalability issues. They haven't moved fully to sharding yet. They haven't moved to proof of stake yet, and there's a lot of things that hold them back, and there's no regulations. So, there's a lot of things that are holding it back as well, that will practically get solved at some point. But I have no doubt that at some point the industry will push forward to a point where a
Yeah.
lot of what you're saying starts to make a lot more sense too. So I'm not too worried about that part. 'Cause technology always goes forward.
Well, yeah, yes and no, because it's you're right. I mean, it's a whole ecosystem, right? So it's for example, Editional, like it's an app, so it's an iPhone app, so literally like anybody can create like a NFT, which is a little piece of digital art, and claim it or share it, and they made everything free for everybody, but they pay the gas fee. So when the gas prices like increase, and if they're not careful, like I mean you can go bankrupt with increase of price fees right now, so of gas fees. And so it's yeah, it's something that everybody has to work on their piece at the same time to make it happen. I think that's I mean that's the value also of like cooperation. I mean, additional partner, we partner with OpenSea, with First Edition, like other like curation platforms. I mean, it's and marketplaces. So it's a lot of like like talking to each other to figure it out. And I think that, I mean, coming from a very old fashioned industry like the art market, and I mean finance people will tell you the same. I mean, nobody talks to each other when there's like just a tiny piece of cake and everybody wants a piece of it. Nobody talks to each other, and here in blockchain everybody's trying to build something new, so everybody has to talk to each other to make it happen. So it's, but they're still for-profit companies, right? So it's like finding a way to make the whole industry move forward without, like giving everything to the commons, pretty much. But so it's still like, I mean, even just looking at the art, in like what you were saying, like everybody should be able to create like a piece of digital art and display it. And when you think about just the wallets, it's like it's like when I look at my NFTs, like art NFTs in Trust Wallet, I mean, I can't even zoom on it and I can't project it anywhere. And so there's still missing pieces and like missing distribution links. Like this, we haven't figured out the whole chain, no pun intended. But it's yeah, we have to work on all aspects of it. So it's yeah, I mean that's what makes a new market exciting. I think this is like everything has to be built, but you also want everybody to adopt everything tomorrow, and it's not going to happen, right? Like you have to bring people in, you have to explain it, and the education part is where you have to not use the word NFT, you have to not use the word blockchain, and build products that just work and scale. You're right. So yeah, it's not easy. I would say.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit more about the additional app, how that works.
Yeah, so it's a very new app. It's been live for like 40 days now, I think. So it's only on the iPhone. Sorry for all like Android users. But it's an app that anybody can download for free, and you can start creating a little piece of art like you would create an Instagram post. You have filters. I call them filters on steroids, because they are like amazing, like artistic filters, where you can really modify an image to like to make it look like anything. And then you can it's based on the blockchain, on the Ethereum blockchain, and so you create limited edition of this NFT. So you can pick, you create an edition of 10 or an edition of 5 or an edition of 2. And when you publish it, people can claim it and trade your little piece of art for something else. So it's really Instagram for creatives. and then you have your own collection. You can interact with the artist. I just published an interview today with one of the artists that is on Editional, that is very popular on Editional, and she says she's a photographer and she's never done digital art, and she started and she loves it. There's another one who is very, very popular. I mean, when he publishes a piece of art on Editional, his work gets claimed in like the first like 3 seconds. So it's a little bit addictive because you're like, oh, like there's a lot of FOMO involved when you're not in front of your iPhone. When you're like, oh, I missed one. It's like 2 minutes ago and it's already gone, and trying to trade for it. So everything is free, like on the app. So you can claim, you can trade, you can chat with the artists, and then we partner with OpenSea you can actually sell like editions on OpenSea. And that's where, when I was saying that like there are new rules that are getting created for digital art, there's this rule that edition 1, so kind of like, blockchain is all about the genesis atom, the number 1 of everything, right? I mean, you've seen on OpenSea, I'm sure there's been this Formula One car that sold for like a lot of money. I think
totally.
it was like 120K or something, and this like Neon District, Genesis, Boss, etc., etc. So somehow it became like that all the first editions of digital art that are created on OpenSea and that are on OpenSea on Editional are retained by the creator. So if you create one edition of 10, for example, you always retain edition 1, and then the 9 other editions can be claimed by anybody else. And then you can sell your edition 1 on OpenSea or like somewhere else, and it kind of holds more value than the other ones. And this rule never existed in the art market. I mean, when there was an edition of 10 prints, for example, in like in the art market, I mean, edition 1 versus 8 or 10 like was not necessarily more valuable at all. I mean, it was not like the rule that edition 1 was like always the only one that has like more value. And there's even like a curation site called First Edition, and it's Jake Bruckman from CoinFund who made this curation site with all first editions of digital art, and made a gallery on CryptoVoxel. So it's like a 3D VR gallery on CryptoVoxel, and then sell these first editions on OpenSea with the agreement of the artist. And so there's a lot of like curation and coordination with the artist, and they've made like some good money, as you said. Like it's a lot of money for digital art that is being spent right now. So it's very interesting. It's fascinating actually, and so I mean, you should try it. It's really, even I've made like digital art. I'm like the anti creative person. That like I'm like the worst creative person, but it's fun. It's really fun.
Yeah, I'd love to try it out. So basically, I have an iPhone, so I wouldn't have an issue. But you download it, and then I assume you upload whatever the image is, correct?
You can. I mean, it's a lot of people actually use other apps to modify the images and replicate the image and make like a little like collage type of thing, and then you have like the filters are directly in the Editional app, so it's pretty it's native filters will allow you to make the effects and modify the image, and and then you publish, and that's it.
Okay, that's pretty easy. So like if I pull out a piece of paper and I draw a picture of a butterfly and I want to put that on the app, I just take a picture of it and it uploads to the app? How does that work?
Yeah.
Oh, just like that?
Yep, I mean, just like that. I mean, there are a lot of illustrators actually on Editional as well. Like not just not just digital artists. Actually, that's the interview for next week. It's funny. It's a friend of mine who lives in the UK, and she was like, "Oh, I'll try it," and now she's super popular, and she never even thought of like like she has no idea what blockchain is. Now she's having trouble like get a wallet on OpenSea because now she's selling her work on OpenSea. And at first she was like, I don't know, I don't have Ether. Like, I don't know how to start like an OpenSea account. Like, you have to help me. And it's fun to see people who had no intention to go into blockchain actually find a purpose and actually make money of it. So it was quite fun. But yeah, you can totally. So there's still, they're also like people who just upload picture of their beer or like like their breakfast, and these ones really don't go for that much of like, I mean, they don't get claimed that fast, or it's very much right now a community decision of like, do I value it or do I not, and hopefully we have more curators also that emerge from the community to make collections of artists, because I mean, everything is decentralized, and I know people have been a little bit against curation because it's against the idea of decentralization, but I'm also not a big fan of everything might not have to be decentralized, right? At least at first, because yes, we all want peer-to-peer curation and the community telling us what they like, what has value, etc., etc. But at first you might have like more content, so you might want to have more curators who tell you what they like, and you might want to follow what they like, the artists that they follow. So it's a lot of curation ideas that are being worked on at Editional as well. But for now, it's like pretty much anybody can upload anything and claim anything, trade anything. So it's yeah.
Absolutely. And it sounds like it's really easy to use too. So does it like automatically become an NFT?
Yes. It gets created. It gets it's stored on IPFS, and it's an NFT. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So what do you see additional like evolving into? Like, do you want it to be more of a social marketplace where artists can interact with each other or anyone can interact with an artist? Or is it mostly going to be just a marketplace?
Well, I hope not. I hope that it doesn't just become a marketplace, because to be honest, when I first I tested their beta like way before I started working with them. They just asked people in the industry to play with it, and for me the first reaction was really like, wow, like this is a social network where I can actually not see people's kids or people eating breakfast or eating an apple, and really see like exciting and refreshing art being created, and I think this is really where you hear, I mean, I won't say younger people, but like or like even techies say like, oh, I don't need art in my life, like why would I need to collect art? And I was like, I feel really sad when people say that. It's like people would say like, I don't need to be excited, or I don't need to listen to music or anything. It's a little sad. So these apps, like for me, really carries like ideas that there is something for millennials, and that an NFT, like NFTs really can, you can have an NFT can be a piece of art, but it can also be a piece of, it can have like you can claim a concert ticket, or it could be a raffle for a T-shirt. I mean, for what I know, so it's much more interactive than just a picture. So it's a lot of opportunities that might actually crack the code of like how people are gonna consume art in the future.
Absolutely. So the goal is pretty much to make it like the Instagram of crypto art.
Yeah, hopefully, and even more. Like, I mean, it's like crypto art. I think it's like we would like to have people who are not just who don't understand blockchain or crypto. Like I think it's like just any artists who want to create digital artworks. I think that's kind of the idea for anybody. I think it's funny because some established artists might actually be too far along in their process of like really curating the way their art look, or like they might not Editional might not work for them because it's more for people who are like starting and who want to experiment and find their voice, and I think it would be more exciting if it was like like discovering new talents and having people be excited to like actually be able to be creative and that they did not know about it before trying the app. So, and I'm a very like optimistic person, so this is might not happen, but
Well, I can tell. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I mean it's for me it's an amazing like use case. I mean it might not be the most practical one. It's not like selling a house or something, but it's I don't think we understand NFTs yet. Like, I mean, the potential is unlimited. Like, literally, like it can hold anything. It can, people have understood NFTs. Like, I think for the fact that it's okay, like it's a unique token, fine. So like the use case with art is pretty obvious. Like you can have a unique piece of art, but you can have anything else in the token. I mean, you can. When I was at snark.art, we did people redeemed an NFT on our website, and it was like containing like all the instructions to be part of a live performance, like live theater performance. So it can be a concert ticket, it can be like anything, and pretty much I don't think we've worked with NFTs enough yet to really see the what it can do.
Yeah, definitely. I love what you're doing with it. I'm totally going to download it today and play with it a bit and kind of figure out how to use it.
Oh, tell me your username. I'll send you some cool art and artists to follow.
Yeah, I have a bunch of friends that are artists that are trying to figure this stuff out, and there hasn't really been a simple way to upload your art and to like enhance it with filters and stuff, and then put it on the blockchain and sell it as an NFT. So I'm definitely going to jump into it and play with the app today. Sounds really cool. Love what you're doing with it.
It is like my husband is mad. Like when I'm we're like in the evening and he's taking care of the kids, and he's like, "What are you doing on your phone?" And I'm like, "Shut up! I have to claim this work. It's gonna go in like 1 second." And it's like, really, seriously, but yeah, no, it's fun. It's fun, and no, and it's funny, and I have a 7-year-old daughter, and she actually has done like a lot of cool stuff with the filters, which I was trying to test, like what she would do with it, and it's she's done like pretty cool things. So it's I'm not pushing it to kids, like it's not a kid app, but just
You never know. Kids are very creative.
yeah, and yeah, and now actually like they redeem their chores, what they call toy coins, with a burner wallet. We've worked with Austin Griffiths from the burner wallet to do like a version for kids. So that's a fun side project.
Very cool. Yeah. What other projects are you working on outside Editional?
So I'm involved with a foundation called Radical Exchange, which is sort of related to blockchain, but not just blockchain. It's based on a book called Radical Markets, and Glenn Weil, who wrote that book, he wrote a paper with Vitalik on radical liberalism. So there's I helped them with communication, and they had their first conference in Detroit, where Vitalik was a keynote speaker. So I'm involved in that, and that's they're using a lot of mechanism design, decentralization, and other capitalist ideas to make a fair system and implement more like UBI and other things. So it's quite an interesting foundation that pretty much unite technologists, politicians, economists, philosophers, and it's quite refreshing to have all the different types of people talk to each other. So I'm very involved in that foundation,
Mhm.
and then gather different companies who work on art and blockchain projects, and in different ways. I mean, we're looking into doing probably a consortium of these companies to help. I was telling, like, help the cooperation and the dialogue between the companies to move forward, and maybe help adoption. So we're working on that as well, and then there's something called Nifty Supply that I'm working on. It's my own company with Thess Fibers, and it's more towards fashion. So it's more for indie fashion designers to help them use the blockchain. So now we're doing a lot of testing with them, like how they would use the blockchain. We do product market fit before releasing a product. So I can't tell you the product because I don't know. We have to talk to them first. So yeah, that's pretty much the way we're doing it. And
That's interesting, though. How does fashion and blockchain go together?
so there are a lot of so I'm sure you've heard, like, LVMH is working now with Consensus to do like provenance and authenticity like marks for their like fashion pieces to but they're like high fashion, right? So it's
Uh-huh.
high value items, but the angle we're looking at is there are a lot of indie fashion designers who are very involved and very active on the secondary market already. So we do, like, for example, limited edition sneakers, and these go for a lot of money on the secondary art market. So we're trying to work with them and to figure out how they could best use the blockchain and see if there's a way to just tokenize it, or like work with IoT companies, or like what the best way would be for fashion designers. I think it has not been really looked into so much for fashion. I mean, art, there are a lot
Mhm.
of use cases, but for fashion it could be, they're way more like current designers, I mean, are very um, tech savvy already. I think it's really in their processes already. So it's an easier conversation, I think, with young fashion designers or sneakers designers to introduce this like tokenization blockchain concepts to them. So yeah, more in the fall, I would say, on that one. And
Yeah, I remember reading articles this spring actually regarding Louis Vuitton and Christian Dior.
yeah,
Um, they wanted to use blockchain to track their luxury goods and to help verify authenticity. I think that's what I remember reading. But
yeah.
yeah, it's cool that they're getting in the space too. So it really kind of opens up what you can do with blockchain for fashion and especially high luxury goods and whatnot, like you were talking
Yeah,
about.
so I'm also like very interested to follow what they're actually doing, because they're huge companies. I really don't know how they're gonna really implement something like that, because if it's top down, like, it's gonna take years. I mean, it's really, I don't know. I mean, it's big for Consensus. I mean, I know the person who like was working on it with them, and it's a big project, but it's also, you're at the mercy of like bureaucracy and huge corporation on the fashion side. So yeah, I really hope it does work, because it's, same as, Facebook coin. It's a great corporate use of blockchain.
Absolutely, but there are a lot of projects that are developing sidechains still right now, and the ability to launch a sidechain that's also private. So that'll make it a lot easier for these big bureaucratic corporations too.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great achievement that they are already just like signed the deal with them. So yeah, let's see. But yeah, so it needs to be done at all the levels. I think it's very much same as the art market. I think it needs to be more people need to experiment.
How do you think blockchain will eventually shape the way that we look at art, from your opinion?
I hope it doesn't actually shape the way we look at art, because if we have to wait for people to understand blockchain to change their conception of art, or make them think of art, I think we're going to lose an entire generation of people who could have looked at art without blockchain. So I'm strong uh, you know believer in we should not have blockchain conferences that are trying to get mainstream adoption. I think we should have more digital arts events, and that's one thing I forgot to mention when you asked me what I was involved in. We've done the first digital art fair in New York in May, and we're going to do the second one in Miami in December. And we need just to talk about digital art. I mean, this is something that people understand, and if we tell them it's a limited edition of digital art, they can look into it to know how it's limited, right? But they should not be obliged to know that it's on blockchain, that it's an NFT, that it's how it's stored, etc., etc. I think that's supposed to be us to do the work, to make people comfortable enough that they just believe in digital art. So for me, we should really, I mean, it's going to shape it in a way that it's allowing digital art to even exist. And I think this is the way that we're not going to lose entire generations of people who are not going to care about art. And that's beautiful and quite a very large enterprise. I don't think we should expect anybody to know about blockchain, or the thing that we have to get more people inside the blockchain world to understand and focus more on the person and the use case and the end product, more than blockchain. I mean, let's ban the NFT world for everybody to use.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. How do you think blockchain will eventually help artists? I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but to kind of recap that and rehash it, how do you think it'll be beneficial?
Well, for artists, I mean, if we're talking now about digital, I mean, even any artist, I think this is, and especially digital artists, I think one revolutionary thing is royalties. I mean, you've said it, and it's the first time ever that fine art, or art, I can't really say art artists, but not musicians, but people who paint and who do digital art can actually expect anything from secondary sales. I mean, this is never seen. So I think this is really the way to monetize their work and get more audience. I mean, I've talked about my friend within the UK. We never thought about even publishing her illustrations. I mean, she makes them for friends and everything, and now she's selling them on OpenSea for 1 ether. And I think this is where if we can burst the myth of the starving artist, I think this is amazing. If we can do that with code and blockchain, so yeah, I would stick with royalties for the artists.
So, is there anything for the audience and for the listeners that you want to share that you have going on, or any important dates or anything that they should be aware of, whether it's what you're doing personally or with Editional or your other projects? What should the audience and listeners be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is all the platforms you mentioned, like Super Rare, the app Editional. I think if people are interested in digital art, it's quite interesting content that is published there. So I think it's also if people are not yet into blockchain, I mean, the way I created a wallet and did all these painful things to get dollars change for Ether was to get a CryptoPunk, and which is a little piece of digital art. And so I think if people browse these platforms that are selling a piece of digital art, like OpenSea or Super Rare or like Rare Art Labs and etc. I think that's a really good way to get into blockchain. To be honest, it's less scary. You're actually getting something out of your cryptocurrency. You can buy pieces of art, support artists. This is a very good way to get into it. We published recently a paper called "There is no such thing as blockchain art." With people from East Berlin. So I think that might be a good way to start. I think it's a good. I wrote it, so it's it's a little self publicity, but it's or I should say, people said it's a good way to get into a good summary view of the state of the blockchain art market. I mean, there is no, the whole theory is that there is no such thing as one thing being blockchain art. There are a lot of applications of blockchain for art and artists. So yeah, if you just Google "there is no such thing as blockchain art," you'll find it, or on my Twitter. Yeah, and we talk about a lot of things in that paper. So if you have time, that's a good a good place to start.
Very cool. Well, hey, thanks for taking the time and everything out of your busy schedule and logistically crazy traveling to hop on the podcast and talk a little bit about art and what's going on and what you're doing with Editional. I know the audience will definitely appreciate it. And yeah, again, thank you for coming on.
Again, anytime, really. Like, if you need anything else or any more details, I'm wherever I am, and really, like, I'm at the end of the the end of the world. I will take the time to talk about it. So yeah, no, thank you for caring about that subject. I think this is quite a niche subject, but it's an important one that could really mean a lot, both for crypto and for people from other industries. So this is great that we're talking about it. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome. And maybe we'll hop on the podcast again later on, maybe later in this year, and talk about your progress and everything and what's going on. So yeah, I would love to have you on again eventually.
Again, anytime.
Awesome. Sounds good. Okay. Bye.
Bye.